use the word emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and,
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus. You have accessed entry 746.IS2903. Certificate number 31247. The Mafeking Cadet Corps.
On my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God and my country, and to obey the Scout Law, to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight.
We should explain to future lava lizards living in the wilderness, struggling for survival in the rubble of our civilization.
Lava wilderness.
Living in abandoned radio shacks. We should explain that people used to do that for fun. People
live in the rubble of abandoned radio shacks?
Yeah, sure.
I guess.
They were called tweakers.
Oh,
no.
Yes.
No, people would just go out into the wilderness for fun. This is maybe the first time in history. When do you think the first people camped for fun? Victorians?
We've bounced from tweakers because I have so many tweaker stories, even recent ones. But let's see. The first time people went out, I mean, it was part of the Enlightenment, that the idea that the wild, natural...
The city sucks.
Yeah, the people...
Which was true, sewers having not been invented.
But like indigenous people were somehow benighted.
And the forest is full of, the Emersonian stuff about the transcendental experiences that will await you in the virgin forest.
Wait. Did I say benighted?
I think you called them benighted.
No, benighted means pitiful, and the Enlightenment people felt that indigenous populations were, or it was one theory that they were, elevated.
Enlightened.
They were an enlightened people. They hadn't been despoiled by civilization, and they lived in a state of grace.
I thought you were thinking they were benighted, and you were ready to march out with your hymnal and convert a few savages.
Some Enlightenment people felt that way about it. There was a lot of public argument about indigenous people in the Enlightenment. But anyway, moving forward, did any of those people actually go camping, is your question?
Thoreau, I guess.
Yeah, right.
Does that count?
It does. And that was a very popular book.
I think the Victorians did. I think they would go think, what a lark. Bring Mabel. We'll even bring the children.
Well,
I'm making this all up, and I'm not going to look it up.
In those big the big estates that had follies built,
outdoor buildings.
Or
faux kind of Greco-Roman
didn't
vibes.
Marie Antoinette have a little rustic village?
She had a Petit Trianon
that
they just built for her because she said, I would like to have a Petit Trianon.
So, they would traipse down at least to the far end of the estate and cook, roast a goat or whatever. But
it used to be the aristocracy because no one else had time for traipsing.
Right.
When are you going to traipse? When you're bringing in the millet.
Right. When are you going to traipse? When you're bringing in the millet.
It's also not fun if you're in the fields all day to be like, hey, kids, would you like to sleep in the field? And they're like, we did that 3 years ago, Daddy, when the sorghum crop died.
Right.
But today
So what does the historic record say, Ken, about the first people to throw on a sack and...
It was probably some 50s dad. The station wagon haven't been invented.
Well, now, another question would be the age of exploration. Is it really just rich people folly, going out on a camping lark.
Well, the thing about the Age of Exploration is it makes camping sort of seem cool, which is kind of the story in this entry. It's not just that camping is romantic, but it's also adventurous.
Well, sure.
And connotes ideas of boys' own adventure tales from faraway parts of the globe and as you say, the exotic residents thereof.
You were always also trying to steal some Aztec gold.
I mean, that's the main thing.
Yeah, right.
And in fact, gold is literally the inciting element of our story today of the Mafeking Cadet Corps.
Oh, exciting.
But I don't know. We must have talked about this. What's your camping CV? Do you take the kid camping?
Well, growing up in Alaska, car camping was not a thing that I can't think of anyone who went car camping. Everybody went camping. Partly there wasn't that infrastructure of big campgrounds with established fire pits and so, but also there's an
abundance of places.
Yeah, you can go camping 5 minutes outside of Anchorage. You just pull over and walk into the brush.
And is that a thing people do? They'll just tent camp in some pretty spot where like much of Alaska, there is no one?
Yeah, we used to go on 3-4 day hikes where you would hike up and when you got tired, pitch your tent on a flat place of ground, and then the next day hike higher. It was usually about gaining altitude. Hike until you are at the top of something, and
but the top's always a false top.
Well,
and you think, hey, look over there,
and that's the problem. Then you're like, oh, we got to keep going, and then
everyone in Alaska ends up on top of Denali, and they're like, we did it.
What happens is you always find like a big steep field of shale,
yay!
And it's like, how are we going to get across this shale? And then everybody ends up just sliding down the shale, which is incredibly fun. If you lose like 1,500 feet, just like surfing on a piece of shale.
I'm learning so much about Alaskan hobbies.
Yeah, it's really
sliding down the shale, sliding down the shale.
This was true for my family. I don't know if that's true for everybody. But then when I came back to Washington, I guess I'd gone to YMCA camps and stuff. But
there's a camping culture here today with the abundance of young male people with money and BMWs for the first time in their lives.
But the car
and the beautiful
camping
mountains
thing
nearby
really baffled me. Like drive up to some place and pull over and roast weenies
put a tent very near your car.
Yeah. Now
you can see your car.
Or those cars the trucks that people have camping like tents on the roof. That seems very cool. But car camping. So anyway, in answer to your question, we are going camping this weekend.
So timely.
We are going down to Oregon to go camping with some friends, and it's car camping, and we're going to roast wieners and camp. So
marshmallows. Sit in uncomfortable slung back chairs.
Yeah.
And get bit by things.
Get all of your clothes smelling like smoke. I mean, I
in the first minute.
It sounds fun. And, I have a 10-year-old, so she doesn't want to hike to 3,500 feet and then ride down on shale. She doesn't know if she wants to or not because she's never done it. But I think she wants to get her feet wet with some marshmallows.
Marshmallows before shale. And that's the Alaskan way.
And then the car is right there. So, you can, if you have a freak out, you can go in and listen to Sirius FM.
People must age out of camping. Old people always have RVs.
No,
do you feel like you're pushing the envelope of tent camping?
Well, when was the last time you spent 2 hours in an REI? Because it's full of old people.
Yeah, I guess you see them at these car campgrounds, right?
Yeah, with their butane stoves and their delaminated Gore-Tex jackets.
I have all the stuff. I have a camp stove, and we've got tents and sleeping bags. But the problem is...
Did you grow up camping?
No.
Is there camping
South
in Korea?
Korea not being particularly conducive.
Right.
So really,
tell that to the cast of MASH.
Boy, they had tents.
They camped for 10 years.
They gave their tents fun name like The Swamp, and they had distilleries in them.
Oh.
So I'm the most like pro camping person in my family, and I could take or leave it.
Yeah, right.
Like Mindy finds, and the thing is, my wife dislikes camping, and she is incontrovertibly correct.
Yeah, that's true.
We have a really good life. And camping, and there's so many better ways to experience nature now that there is really no need to hike to 3,500 feet and then find an appropriate piece of shale to get back down on.
You guys rent a helicopter and it takes you to 3,500 feet and you Griswold for a minute and get back in.
I mean, there's plenty of, I enjoy hiking. There's so many just middle class ways to enjoy nature that do not involve sleeping on the ground, eating food that is not as good as the food anywhere else, wearing clothes that, as you say, do not smell as good as the clothes anywhere else.
Yeah.
I mean, camping is full of privations, and I don't really know how I would sell it to someone. And so, the kids would be good sports occasionally, and sometimes at different ages they would even want to camp, but it was pretty sporadic, and I would really have to drive it. And again, I'm like a 5.5 at best on camping.
Do you feel a certain obligation as a Northwesterner to kind of like have that hardy camping?
I think that's part of it, and not just as a Northwesterner, but as an American man.
Yeah.
We were car camping with the kids once, and I could not get I got my kindling, and I got my tinder, and I got the 4 stages of things you're supposed to get to light your fire, and I could not get the fire to light.
Oh, that's embarrassing.
And I did not feel like the way I would feel normally if some skill didn't work. My risotto didn't come out, or I couldn't get the tabs to align on my word processing document. Like I really did feel like what a primal failure I am.
Yeah. Did you start using the title to your car and your birth certificate and stuff trying to get it lit? Your master's thesis?
Kid nearby had a thing of lighter fluid. I was like, hey, can I...
No, don't use lighter fluid.
Because then the weenies taste like...
Yeah.
I don't know what.
They taste like lighter fluid. But also, it's dangerous.
It's fine.
Because the flame can go up the stream of lighter fluid into the can and create a bomb.
We did not. That happens if you pee on the fire too.
Yeah, it does.
Or that's when you pee on the third rail.
The flame goes right up your urethra.
No, we did not. I did not pour lighter fluid on a lit fire. The problem at this point was the fire, like the whole weekend, was not lit.
I see.
But I remember that feeling of, man, I should have been paying attention in Scouts.
Yeah, man, not man.
Exactly. And really, it's a dumb way to feel. Like, we do not live in a time when that's a survival skill for at least another 5 to 7 years.
But
that kind of stuff is not going to be a survival skill.
You've got to be able to light a fire. I mean, don't wait 7 years to figure it out after you're living in a Radio Shack with lava lizards.
You can't see.
I guess if lava's around.
I know you love having every skill you would need in that scenario, but it's a dream. It's a beautiful dream. I will never have every skill I would need in that scenario. I'm going to last 30 seconds in that scenario, even if I get all the gear.
We have a group of friends that call me Sparky. That's
because of your ham radio love?
No, because I will light a fire. Anytime a group of people stops on a trail for more than 20 minutes, I'll get a fire going.
That's actually called arson, or
no. I mean, like a contained fire, a little cooking fire, or warm yourself around the fire kind of fire. So I like to start fires, and I'm also a pyromaniac. I mean, I will sit and stare into a fire until you pull me away, but because the flames can.
But did you do like scouting as a kid? Did you have, or did you do all Alaskans basically do scouting just by osmosis?
I was an avid Cub Scout and really engaged in all the Cub Scouting things, but it didn't really translate to Boy Scouts. I mean, I was a Boy Scout, but my...
Do you still obey the law of the pack?
I do.
It's a very important part of the Cub Scout oath is that you're going to obey the law of the pack.
I'll obey the law of the pack.
Which seems a little ominous. What's the pack going to do? Is the pack going to go chase down gazelles?
Yeah, if that's the law. Is
the pack going to go wilding in Central Park?
No, in fact, I got my chip and tote, which was my chip and tote.
I know a lot of made up Scout words, and that is not a thing.
No, your chip and tote is what you get when you have passed all the requirements to be able to carry a knife or hatchet. And you have to pass all the tests.
Oh, because you can tote it and then chip things with it?
Yeah, chip. You can tote.
I believe it should be called a tote and chip.
Tote and chip. Well, maybe it was. I always call it a chip and tote. But I passed all the requirements. I was very proud. I carried a hatchet on my belt. And then one time when a group of kids, I was out in the woods and I
cut off someone's hand.
No, I threw my hatchet at a tree and some scout leader saw it and was like, your chip and tote is revoked.
You deserve to lose your chip and tote.
Did.
That's terrible hatchet etiquette.
I was extremely ashamed at losing my chip and tote or tote and chip. And that, again, I had violated the law of the pack.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Did Aquila tell you to turn in your That's the funny thing about Cub Scouts is it all comes from the Jungle Book. That thing we all love. I hope I can achieve Panther level. It predates Disney turning them all into cute cartoon characters.
Yeah, right.
I wonder if they were mad. Like they thought Jungle Book sounded so cool, and
dangerous.
Kipling is the frontier and the wilds and the farthest reaches of the empire.
I bet Kipling rolled over in his grave, but he was doing that already.
Probably
for a variety of other reasons.
Maybe they licensed it. You can be the barbershop quartet vulture, and you can be the.
I think some of it is, as I transitioned to Boy Scout, like to be a successful Boy Scout, it's harder. You have to do things.
It's a lifestyle.
Yeah. And being a Cub Scout, everything is kind of handed to you.
It's just weekly activity day. Today we're going to do a craft.
Yeah, right. Whereas Boy Scouting, it's like, oh, you want that merit badge? Well, go figure it out. And that's like...
Find an astronomer in your community. Find out 4 different ways in which astronomy has changed his life.
Scouting has watered down now, because anytime I'm out in the trails, I find somebody's Eagle Scout project, and they built a bench somewhere and then put a big plaque on it. Like,
you are on the record that Eagle Scout projects are now just big, they're basically fascist architecture.
Or it's great inflation. Like, this is your Eagle Scout project. Shouldn't you have built an old folks home? Shouldn't you have made a solar powered car that drives across you built a bench? Like, come on.
We have our neighbors next door have 2 boys, and they are avid Boy Scouters for some reason that I don't understand, because it's 2020 and
they live on Finney Ridge.
They're liberal Seattleites, but for some reason he must have been just loved scouting as a kid, and the kids both just love scouting, and it just seems like hard work. They are perpetually driving to some place in the Cascades.
My best friend in high school was an Eagle Scout, and actually the guy I'm going camping with this weekend is an Eagle Scout.
Oh, you're in good hands.
And it really did feel like the second half of high school, he was just like beavering away at this. He never told anyone. He thought it would make him very unpopular with girls. So like I was one of the only people in his life that knew he was really, really, like into scouting.
Closeted Eagle Scout.
Yeah, but then he would put on, his polo shirt and pop his collars and put his Varnays on and come to school and be like, hey, whatever, man. I'm not some nerd that knows how to tie a bowline. But you've talked about scouting in the Mormon culture as being like some kind of crazy super scouting cult.
Well, that's kind of my experience with scouting, and it comes from a generation that was a super crazy. The Mormon affinity for scouting, I don't know if it's just a cultural accident or if it really is just part of, being in the Mountain West where rugged boys' adventure
frontier
seems important. The frontier, and also just keeping the youth out of trouble. There's got to find a way to keep the young ones moral after school.
Yeah, keep those Varnays off of them.
With the presence of a pool hall in this community. So the answer was
dancing.
Exactly. So the answer was, if you keep them tying knots and making fire, they won't touch themselves.
Yeah, keep the boys in canvas tents so the girls can be working on their needlepoint.
And so that generation that kind of came up just formed as a good person like that, probably by like my neighbor Oscar. The generation that came up formed by that is like, my kids have got to have this too. But in this case, they ran a major religious organization that ran the American Mountain West, and so they can make it compulsory. And Latter-day Saint kids are essentially conscripted into Boy Scouts. We haven't really. Yeah, it's like a draft.
Are all the Romney boys? Comes up. They're all scouts. I'm sure.
You can just tell by looking at them, can't you?
Yeah.
I wouldn't care to speculate, but
yeah.
But it really does become the kind of the youth camp, youth night arm of the LDS Church for teenage boys. Is it all runs according to Boy Scouts. And I remember really kind of chafing at it a little because of...
Were you conscripted? Were you forced into scouting?
Yeah, sure. Every living in Korea every Wednesday night. I mean, we camped sometimes, although there weren't that many options.
How many different kinds of knots can you tie?
See, that's the thing.
I see.
I was just hanging out with my friends. I didn't like the so scouting, as we'll see, has a real paramilitary
I know the
origin and ethos.
I know the Soviets say that because in the movie Red Dawn, the invading Cubans and Nicaraguans all talked about scouting. The Wolverines were all scouts, and they were described as a paramilitary operation.
Then that's what saved America.
Well, eventually.
Well, I mean, just think about it. All the language of it is troops and patrols. And to us, it's second nature. Like, of course, that's how scouting is. But no, scouting was created as an outgrowth of military. And in fact, the word scouting didn't used to mean a youth movement. Scouting, as we will see, and as we learn about the Mafeking Cadet Corps, just meant reconnaissance.
Right.
And it got repurposed for young boys just as a result of just kind of a single historical accident and cult of personality.
First in, last out, Ken.
Is that from Red Dawn?
No, that's Recon. That's their motto.
Oh,
First
it
in,
is?
last out. Yeah.
Good job, Recon.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
they really put in the hours.
They do.
Don't you think somebody
They're in there first.
Doesn't somebody come before Recon and build them like infrastructure?
No, I don't think so. I mean, before Recon is the SR-71, right? Looking down at from a.
But the Soviets had rugged youth boys. Like,
oh, for sure.
Did you know Peter and the Wolf? In Peter and the Wolf, Peter is like a member of the Young Soviet Lads or whatever it's called.
Peter and the Wolf doesn't predate the Soviet Union?
No.
I didn't know that.
No, it's...
I felt like that was some kind of ancient Russian...
I know, you think it's going to be Baba Yaga.
Yeah.
But Prokofiev was a 20th century composer, and so Peter is a proud member of the...
Wait, is the wolf capitalism?
Yes.
Well, I never knew.
The duck is the Orthodox Church. The bird is the Western running dogs of the... No, so the Soviets really kind of believed in this kind of, the good young boys. And it's the same reason. Think of the kind of loyalty to the institution that gets created when all the boys have to go out in the woods together and rely on each other. And
I think their experience in Stalingrad probably put a different spin on this whole learn to light a fire business.
Yeah, nobody camps for fun anymore in Russia, I think.
Learn to eat rats.
The LDS Church has recently left... It has kind of quit its official connection.
Is that because they allowed gay scoutmasters?
I think there's some kind of. I think a lot of that was the impetus for it.
Or same time.
I think the culture had already been moving away from it. There was a recognition that this was not a good fit for Christianity in every way to spend all your kids' free time learning how to do increasingly arcane outdoorsmanship skills.
Did they join the YMCA Indian Guides? Because I was a member of the Indian Guides as a little kid, and we all, as you moved through the ranks, you would wear different colored feathers in your headdress.
It just occurred to me that somebody must have created some weirder, more conservative version of Boy Scouts now that does not have gays and women.
I'm sure. It's called the White Nationalist Front.
It's called the Boogaloo Boy Scouts, Proud Boy Scouts.
How far did you advance in scouting?
Oh, not at all. I was 16 or 17. I was the senior patrol leader, and I could not care less about the requirements for star or life or whatever.
Right.
And I think I didn't like that either. I didn't like the idea that there was advancement. I think some kids would really love that. Like, oh, I'm just 3 points away from this merit star thing.
Right.
And I didn't respond to that at all. And it's also become controversial for a couple of reasons. One is that there was really no equivalent infrastructure for women. Maybe because Girl Scouts seemed a little too progressive.
Oh, I've always wondered why Girl Scouts are out selling cookies. Like, why aren't there Boy Scout cookies? Well, I know why, because they would suck. But
you've had Scout camp food.
I was down at at a downtown hotel one time with my daughter when she was just like 3 or 4, and a group of 6 Girl Scouts were kind of racing around up and down the stairs at the Four Seasons, and I stopped them and said, and kept a very gracious distance from them in stopping them. I didn't stand on the stairs and say, halt. I was like, excuse me, can you tell me more about Girl Scouts? And they all gathered around all excited and really sung its praises. And they seemed like extremely capable 10 and 12-year-old girls who really were like, Girl Scouts is great. You should get your daughter into it. Here are all the great things we do. And it did sound like a world of adventure rather than... because my sister was a bluebird, a brownie. She was a brownie.
Yeah,
and
it's Cub Scout equivalent for Girl Scouts.
But she didn't move into Girl Scouts. I don't think there was anything there for her.
I know lots of Mormon girls. Like a lot of my nieces are Girl Scouts. It's fun for the same reasons. There's just no institutional support for it, and it felt weird to me when they would just talk about all the important qualities of being a good Boy Scout or man that were being taught. And they all just seemed like skills that they all seemed like attributes that were not gender specific at all. They'd be like, well, the reason why Boy Scouts is good is because it teaches boys to be self-reliant.
Right.
And every time I heard an adjective, I'd be like, but everybody should be self-reliant. That's not a gendered thing.
Everyone should be able to make a tunic out of deer skin.
A sash, a Girl Scout sash out of deer skin. Everybody should be able to make Thin Mint cookies out of deer skin.
You know, when I left the Scouts, I went, now that I think about it, in a way more paramilitary direction because I joined the Civil Air Patrol Cadet Corps, which was not even pretending not to be a Air Force auxiliary.
That actually was.
Yeah.
Is that ROTC for the Air Force, basically?
Yeah, but like separate from school. Yeah. But yeah, if you advance through the ranks in the Civil Air Patrol, you can go to the Air Force Academy and come out with, you know, it bumps you into the Air Force with some kind of advanced placement.
The other problem with like the LDS Church kind of making scouting compulsory is that you wind up with a bunch of people who really don't want to, you know, the troops and patrols are all made of people who don't really want to be there, including leaders who have kind of been frog marched into it. And so you have all these other patrols in your, I don't know, all these other troops in your district. I don't know, the battalion. I don't know the nomenclature.
Cluster.
In your cluster.
In your
like
scrum.
You know, the Lutheran and the Catholic and the Jewish troops all want to be there. Right. And then the Mormons are just like, they have to be there and they can't get their driver's license until they get their eagle.
Maybe that's why we have so many stupid benches out here.
Yes.
It's a bunch of LDS kids that are like, how about if I build a bench?
Gotta do my Eagle project.
So that makes it less fun?
Yeah, it kind of took away the drive and the initiative. And I never cared about any of the, again, outdoor stuff because camping is empirically just not as fun as not camping.
You know, when I was sent to Outward Bound, there were a lot of kids at Outward Bound that wanted to be there because of the adventure.
It's not Scared Straight for everybody, just for you.
Yeah, and I was sent to it as a disciplinary action, and then I was put into the troop of kids that had been sent to Outward Bound by the courts.
Oh, they're all put together?
I guess because I remember watching the other groups. They were like mixed gender, boys and girls. They all like had their little hats on and they were like trooping off to get into their canoes and we watched them canoe away. And then I looked back at the group I'd been assigned to and there was a guy with a switchblade in his boot and there was a guy that had cigarettes rolled up in his sleeve and they were all there from around the country. They'd all been put there all against their will and they all resisted everything for the entire time. We were out there for 2 weeks camping.
And you were in surly cabin.
Just the work. Well, you know, I ended up like sleeping on my own out because, you know, they were dangerous. But luckily I was the only one that could read a map or light a fire. So they didn't kill me.
You kept them alive.
I was the youngest too, because they recognized that I was a delinquent.
All those kids are alive and they're all Alaska state senators today, thanks to you.
Well, no, there was one from Utah. There was one from Miami. There was one from Colorado.
All over?
They came from, and so they had, it was like a crash course in the types of the regional delinquency of
like Audubon Guide.
Yeah, it was like a guy from Brooklyn.
Delinquents of America.
It was like one of those World War II movies where it's like the Jewish guy and
the beginning of the, you know, scouting, the reconnaissance connection to scouting and all the paramilitary trappings, that all dates back to 1899. And
the Boer Wars.
The Second Boer War.
Oh, really?
Yes, that's exactly right. There had been the British Empire claimed South Africa in 1806, which they would always do.
They were super good at that.
Just bring a flag.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there had been there had been Africans there for thousands of years.
How is that possible?
They weren't that worried about that.
But did they have red wool tunics that they wore year round?
No, and it's probably an advantage in much of Africa.
I believe
to not have a red wool tunic year round.
I believe so.
But there had been Afrikaans, like Dutch speaking settlers there
for a long time.
Yeah, for 200 years. Right. And for a while, this was a pretty low grade, low stakes conflict until gold and diamonds were discovered in South African mines. And suddenly it became really important who had the territorial rights here. And all these little conflicts turned into outright war in 1899. And fearing the war that was going to come, Britain started bulking up its South African possessions, including Natal, the province in Southeast Africa.
They sent Michael Caine down there to stomp around.
They sent a veteran of the Zulu Wars, actually. He probably knew Michael Caine and all the whoever else is in those movies. A certain colonel named Robert Baden-Powell. They didn't send a bunch of artillery or cavalry with him because they did not want to appear. The war hadn't broken out yet, and they didn't want to appear to be antagonizing the Dutch and militarizing the region. So they sent Baden-Powell instead. He had served Her Majesty in India and then various African, probably awful tribal repressions, like in the Gold Coast and the Zulu Wars.
Right.
Again, all in a red wool outfit in a fort. And in classic Zulu war tradition, he decides that his military strategy is going to be building a stronghold. There's going to be a garrison at the tiny frontier town of Mafeking.
That's what you need. You always need a garrison.
Put everybody together, put them with all your stores, and put them behind a big wall.
Right.
Unfortunately, he only has like 500 troops in this little town.
Big enough to build a wall.
Yes. So they can build emplacements and they can build trench warfare. And, as we'll see, like history has maybe not been kind to Baden-Powell's his military strategy. In fact, maybe the smartest thing to do was not to put everybody in one place and then just sit there and wait to be found. But that's what he did. And predictably, when war broke out, the Boers, I don't believe all Dutch people are Boers, by the way. Many of them are. No. But back then, all these Dutch people were called Boers.
Yes.
They besieged Mafeking. And suddenly, Baden-Powell and his 500 men are surrounded by as many as 8,000 Boers.
Yes, and they're very, even now, they're pretty resentful of the British.
They are.
I met 3 Boer guys in a youth hostel in Amsterdam, and they had the ability to understand Dutch, Dutchy Dutch. But the Dutch couldn't understand them.
Is that right? Dutch can't generally understand Afrikaans?
Their accent is just so, slurry.
That's how you can tell what the good real language is.
And so it was one of these situations. I palled around with them for a few days where we would go, and they were wicked, these 3. And they had this secret code where they could understand what everyone around them was saying, but then they could talk kind of very openly and just befuddle people. And it was like a secret power. And they were there and they hated the Dutch. It was kind of like the Quebecois.
And they have that, even in English, they have that accent, which today still says, I'm a soldier of fortune from Rhodesia.
Yeah, right.
And I murder animals and possibly locals.
I'm from South Africa, Spalding. I can't drown.
South Africa. So Baden-Powell is now surrounded by 8,000 of these guys who are fighting a war with guerrilla tactics against the premier army and navy in the world, the unbeatable British Empire. And in fact, they're
farmers in floppy hats.
Yeah, they're farmers in floppy hats with guerrilla tactics. And in fact, they succeed. Like the war immediately turns their way. And this becomes some of the first cracks in the foundation of the global British Empire. Wait a second.
Oh,
these Dutch guys with pitchforks are fighting you to a draw.
Oh, this is exciting.
In faraway South Africa.
Even though there are only 500 of you.
Exactly. And part of the problem is that Baden-Powell and 500 men are just sitting there watching their stores dwindle away for 217 days.
Oh, it's a siege.
The town is besieged. And it's not like there's 8,000 Boers outside at all times. Like, they're passing through. They're on their way to do real stuff and take control of railroads and ports. Meanwhile, Baden-Powell's sitting indoors while his men get so hungry they start eating their own horses.
Right, they're tying bowling knots.
Yeah. Baden-Powell is not yet the Baden-Powell of scouting, although he is famous as a scout. He was always the wilderness reconnaissance guy who would get sent into the new terrain first to see where the enemy's camping, where's the high ground. This is his field, and he considers himself an expert at it on two or three continents.
Feels like the high ground was there in Cape Town.
Yeah,
that's where he should have been.
That's where they've got that big mesa-looking thing.
Yeah, but build your fort up there.
Instead, but because he's one of these guys, he loves all the theatrics that can come with tricking the Dutch, the Boers. So he as soon as he takes control of the town, even before war started, he instructs his men to begin not planting mines, because again, he doesn't have any, but creating fake minefields.
Oh.
Dig up areas so they look like minefields. Create just enough trench-looking things so they think we have, or create just enough emplacements so it looks like there's a vast system of trenches.
Wouldn't you uncover a fake minefield pretty fast? Like the first guy that doesn't blow up?
Yeah, but nobody tries it. That's the whole problem.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It's like the emperor has no clothes.
Sure.
The minefield has no clothes. He instructs his men when they're out in their fake system of trenches to pretend they're crawling under or over barbed wire. Although he doesn't have any barbed wire. So you've got all these guys in their red wool uniforms doing panto.
Yeah, right.
Out there.
And they don't have good enough binoculars on the other side.
Exactly. This all hinges on the lack of good Boer binoculars. Because he can put together an acetylene torch and a biscuit tin, a cookie can for you, John. Does that help?
Thank you. Yeah, it does. I was like, what?
I guess you probably think a cookie can is something else. Like that's what you call butts. Shake your cookie can. He can take stuff like that and MacGyver it into a fake searchlight. And the Boers will be like, oh, they've got a searchlight.
This feels like the plot of Road Warrior.
Yeah, or Home Alone. In fact, some of the men are even told to dress as women when they're doing menial tasks. Like if they're delivering, water to another troop. Okay, good. Now go put on. Maybe Baden-Powell just like to see.
Oh, this story gets hotter and hotter all the time. Yeah. Show me your cookie can.
They're a long way from home, John.
Yeah,
their wives and kids are in, no way to say, Dorset?
Yeah, sure.
Bristol?
Sure, you've got your barrack wife.
Who can say? So anyway, he's doing this kind of
subterfuge.
Psyops, subterfuge. And again, the strategy is not good, but all this really catches the attention of the folks back home because the Siege of Mafeking becomes, in the British public mind back in London, just the center of the war.
Oh, because they have embedded reporters who are sending dispatches.
It's even better. One of the embedded reporters is no less than Lady Sarah Wilson, pioneering woman journalist, the niece of the Duke of Marlborough, or maybe the daughter of the Duke of Marlborough, and therefore Winston Churchill's aunt.
Huh.
Although they don't call her that at the time. It would be weird in 1899 to be like, hey, Winston Churchill's aunt, what's up?
Hey, Winston Churchill, who's what, 10 years old at the time?
He would have been born, you're right.
Yeah.
But nobody's come back in time to kill him because the Nazis don't invent a time machine.
Right. They tried.
Oh, yeah, they're trying. They know we're trying to go back in time and kill Hitler. They want to go back in time and kill Churchill. It's a race.
They're down in Paraguay, like working on it.
We have a baby-killing gap. And the other accident is that it's not just journalists. Edward Cecil, the prime minister's son, is the second in command at the garrison when the war begins.
And this is at a time when if the Boers overran the garrison, all these people would be protected and given tea, and there wouldn't be. You're not going to kill the prime minister's son. You're going to.
Presumably. I mean, that's what it would be if it were the French or the German army. But I don't know. These angry guys with chin beards and floppy hats.
Yeah, well, let's not slur them. I mean, I've already slurred them a little. Let's not go. We're not going to get angry letters from the Boers, are we?
I mean, they're descendants. The Afrikaans are lovely. Not the weird ones you met.
The 19th century
and
Boers.
Not the apartheid ones.
No. Those are the bad ones too.
I can't think of any good ones. Not the soldiers of fortune in Rhodesia I mentioned.
I guess
I'm sure there's some.
I know a couple of people that I guess are descended from the Boers that I like quite a bit, but they've been living in America for a long time.
I had a South African friend in second grade, but I guess he was the tall one that always just shoved people around a lot. I'm kind of coming up blank on my search for good South Africans. Charlize Theron.
Okay, I get 100% behind that. Charlize Theron is a great South African.
You would. Is she Dutch? Or I don't know what her ancestry is.
Interesting. Theron.
Charlize is clearly made up, and Theron is clearly made up.
Pretty made up.
She's an alien.
Yeah,
she's
right.
Yeah,
she's a cyborg.
The robot aliens crash landed there. So the public in London, this is the flashpoint of the empire right now. They are in love with every little thing that happens to Colonel Baden-Powell.
Right.
And one of the things that has happened, even though Baden-Powell interestingly has had almost nothing to do with it, is all of the townspeople, the young town boys, have been kind of brigaded into a volunteer corps of cadets, not unlike your Air Force thing.
Sure. Hitler Youth.
The Mafeking, right. Not the Hitler Youth, the Churchill Youth, I guess.
Churchill Youth.
Churchill's Aunt Youth. All the 12 to 15-year-olds in town, Edward Cecil has created them into a little cadet corps and given them, partly to keep them out of trouble, and partly mostly just to free up the soldiers, so the soldiers don't have to do the grunt work. But these are the kids that can now run messengers.
Yeah.
They're doing it on donkeys because it's a farm town. And then eventually when the donkeys get eaten because of Baden-Powell's ridiculous siege idea, on bikes.
Right.
So they're biking around handing off messages,
But they're penny farthing bikes.
ding, ding. They're manning observation posts and, keeping an eye on, there's no artillery, but they're keeping an eye on when the Boer cannons are on the move.
And they appear to bolster the ranks too.
More people, exactly.
Yeah.
From a distance, you can't tell that these aren't Army regulars.
Not if you have
They're
those
staffing the hospitals and
those Boer binoculars.
they don't have the binoculars. They're delivering provisions, all this kind of infrastructure stuff. And
they're doing kick flips
on their donkeys, the donkey being the skateboard of 1899. Now, there's not really much of a Baden-Powell connection here at all. The troop was formed by Edward Cecil. Baden-Powell really never mentions them there's no contemporary account of him being super involved in the Mafeking Cadet Corps, but he did have a childhood, before his reconnaissance career came very naturally to him because he had a unconventional childhood. His father died when he was 3, leaving his mother to raise a house full of boys. And she really kept him in line with kind of scout-like, military-like regimentation.
Well done. She was like the guy in Mary Poppins who fires the cannon on his roof every day at noon.
Yes.
Or every hour. That guy.
Is it every day at 6? It can't be every hour.
Every day at
But on
6.
the other hand, if you were on a boat, would you fire the cannon every day at 6? I feel like Admiral Boom is not really in the Navy. Stolen valor.
Right, I believe so. I believe you're correct.
If you're just on one of those master and commander ships, do you just fire the cannons every day at 6?
My experience on master and commander ships is so limited. I have no idea what they do at 6.
But what would be the purpose?
Get everybody around it's dinner time. Instead of ringing a bell.
Don't they have a bell or a triangle for that?
They use the bells for other things. Ding, 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 ding.
No, this is exactly what they use the bells for. 9 bells next in the watch.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Ding,
Captain
ding,
Master might
ding,
say
ding,
to
ding.
Dr. Commander.
Dinner bell, ding, 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 ding. I don't think they fire.
I never read those books, so I assume that the doctor and the captain are named Master and Commander.
Or
at least they call each other that after hours.
Our friend Jason Finn is going to listen to this episode, and he's going to write us a very angry letter. In fact, it's going to be in the form of text messages to us.
Yes, Gen X drummers be reading Patrick O'Brien books. Am I right?
Yeah.
That classic rock stereotype we all know and love.
So she is employing a really pretty canny strategy, which is making it fun for the boys to do their chores.
And to do outdoor stuff, like get these kids out of my house. I'm a single mom.
Right.
I'm a benighted single mom. Not enlightened, but benighted.
Go collect slugs for me. Go.
And in fact, at one point they have a summer vacation in Wales, and she gets all the boys around and says, kids, what would be fun? I'm going to take the coach or the train, possibly the train at this point, to Wales. You are going to walk. What fun. What larks, eh, lads?
That's pretty good. Where does she live? Manchester?
Yeah, no, North London. They have to walk from London to Wales. And so the kids spend whatever that is, 3 to 5 days.
Getting there.
Walking through hedgerows and sleeping in haystacks. I don't know if you have any experience this reminds you of.
I'm afraid I do.
Did you ever walk across Wales?
No, I went the other way. I went from Heathrow Airport to
Dover.
To the coast. Yeah. I went the other way. I went north to Harwich.
Is there a boat?
Yeah, there's a ferry to Hoek van Holland, whereas Dover takes you to France, and I didn't want to go to France.
Got it.
You
wanted to hang out with the Dutch.
I did.
Who we love. This show is all about how much we love the Dutch.
I wanted to hang out with the Dutch. They're my people. They're not at all.
It had nothing to do with their liberal drug policies. So the kids walked to Wales. And,
I admire this.
And I knew you would. And that was kind of I think that's the beginning of, the child is the father of the man. Like
right. In this case, the mother.
All his tromping around India and Zululand, Nyasaland probably starts right there.
And when they got there, did she say, okay, school on Monday, turn around and walk back?
It's true. No, she has gotten there ahead of them and has the house all warm and waiting. Yeah. I'm sure it's an idyllic scene. So even though Baden-Powell has that in his child, he doesn't appear. There's no evidence that he really cared much about this cadet corps. But that's only the beginning of the story, because in May of the following year, finally reinforcements arrived, and the British papers are full of the heroic relief of Mafeking.
Yeah.
It's kind of the Dunkirk of its time, where like, we screwed up, but now the reinforcements are here. So the original men are all brought home, having now very gaunt, and all the horses been eaten. And they are heroes.
Parades. Yeah.
There are parades. Baden-Powell becomes the youngest major general in the British Army.
And a modern one at this point.
Right. And because it's 1900.
Yeah, right.
If the relief had come sooner, it would have been 1899, and he would have still been a
old-fashioned major general.
Old-timey major general. The cadets are all the 38 men of the Cadet Corps. There's a lot of mythologizing about poor Frankie Brown, who was killed in an artillery attack, a young boy. I think he appears on a stamp even. In fact, he was probably not a member of the Mafeking Cadet Corps because he was only 9.
Oh.
The youngest cadet on record was like 11.
Did they eat him as a donkey? Is that where he went?
History does not relate, but man, I wouldn't be surprised. But this is a huge time of celebration in Britain. This is like mission accomplished.
Because they did end up conquering South Africa.
They do turn it around. They do win the war, even though it was a little bit shakier than it should have been. They had us in the first half, not going to lie. But this is a big, and in fact, the word Mafeking becomes a verb meaning to have wild parties.
Oh,
because the British public says, "Oh, we're Mafeking tonight.
Let's bring that back."
Yeah, let's Mafek.
Yeah,
we need a 21st century word that a noun that ends with ing that we can back form into a verb, but I can't think of one. Futureling, I guess.
Futureling.
What would it mean to futural?
Let's futural.
Are you guys futural now?
It would mean sending correcting emails about topics we didn't fully.
Well, this is your chance, Futureling, to think of a fun 21st century buzzword that ends in ing that we can back formation into a verb. Let's futural. Futural means when we outsource something we can't think of a funny answer to on the show.
Do you like Kipling? I mean, have you ever kippled?
You naughty boy. I've never kippled. We should do a whole show about dirty Victorian postcards.
I love that stuff.
For sure. Love the DVP. And Baden-Powell, now that he's the toast of Britain, during his free nights in the fort, when he wasn't, going from tent to tent like Henry V or eating horses, he is working on his book, of course. He's working on a wilderness survival guide called Aids to Scouting. And of course, scouting still does not mean a global youth movement. Scouting still means performing reconnaissance on possibly dangerous terrain in wartime.
So there's no youth component at this point. He's not borrowing from Cecil and his corps. He's just writing.
This is a book for fellow non-commissioned, for like NCOs,
right? Guide to being a bad boy. This
is how you're cool like me. And now it's cool like me, hero of the Boer War, hero of the heroic siege of Mafeking, which again he brought about with his own utter lack of military strategy.
Did he think that this would be a military handbook that was taught at Sandhurst?
Exactly. That's the idea. Like, officers are going to need to know all my lifetime of living off the land,
I see.
And he's not wrong. Like, back then, if you were in that job, you would have to know all these, what we think of as camping, lighting fire and some foraging and first aid and
how to cook a donkey.
Right. Cooking the townspeople's donkeys, even though they're kind of mad and hungry at you.
Can you be hungry at someone?
Yeah. Yeah. They were mad and hungry at him.
I am so hungry at you.
But in 1908, as you have predicted, this is about to become a children's book. Kids love this. That turns out to be because he's a hero. It becomes basically celebrity culture. It's like Oprah's book club,
right?
In the early 20th century, like, boy, if Baden-Powell thinks these are the skills a man should have, we're going to check this out.
And presumably, he didn't use any swears. No, there wasn't any like how to pick up chicks.
No, I mean the kind of all of the. Doing my best to do my duty to God and my country, to help other people and to obey the scout law. That all comes straight from the upright 19th century military origins of scouting.
Yeah.
I'm sure he would have hated to hear swearing in the ranks or anybody saying anything untoward about Jonesy's mother.
Who's ready to march up and down the square?
So in 1908, when he realizes who's actually reading this book, he puts out a second edition, which he calls Scouting for Boys. because I don't know if any military people read the book, but it became a huge success just on the basis of boys LARPing as wilderness reconnaissance expert, which is really how scouting started.
It's how scouting. It's how recon works.
It should be called LARP,
Right.
boy LARPing of America, not Boy Scouting.
All those snipers or whatever, all they are slightly older boys that like pretend sniping. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, how do you get into sniping? Well, you start as somebody
with a BB gun.
Yeah, you start with a stick and you move to a BB gun.
When the book becomes a children's book, he adds an intro that's more child-friendly, and that means dredging his memory for interactions with the Mafeking Cadet Corps. And so the book includes, because he's got to leverage his greatest hits,
Right.
basically. Remember 8 years ago when I was the hero of Mafeking? So he tells a story about seeing a messenger boy come up on his bike and saying, "Young lad, look the Dutch artillery don't hit you." And he says, "They won't hit me. I'll pedal too fast." Or so it's a little fun story about
Governor?
the can-do spirit of the Blitz in Mafeking.
And did he hat tip to Cecil at this point? Does Cecil ever get written into the record, or is this happening now?
I think only in the historical record, because Mafeking at this point becomes, in 1908, this book comes out, becomes a huge seller. Baden-Powell's publisher sends him on a book tour.
Yeah.
And everywhere he goes, he speaks to eager audiences of boys who, the second he leaves town, start up their own Baden-Powell troop.
Right.
They want to be a cadet corps.
They give him the 3-fingered salute, and
as it were,
he's like the Pied Piper of scouting.
And so it's not top down. He never says, "I'm going to charter an organization," like just boys clubs out at the quarry or the pond or wherever they hang out naked.
Using the book as a guide.
They've got a guide now, and they start their own patrols. And, adults maybe are annoyed to have the boys think they're patrolling like the Wolverines in Red Dawn, but maybe it just keeps them out of trouble in the summer.
Absolutely.
And the Cadet Corps, the Mafeking Cadet Corps, wore the khaki uniforms and either the broad-brimmed hat or the Glengarry cap. I mean, it's a uniform fit for Africa, which is why it's so funny when you see people wearing it in Norman Rockwell paintings in Maine.
Yeah. The knee-high socks. Are nice.
It's just such a crazy uniform, but it dates back to Mafeking because Baden-Powell's now appropriating his own past to try to sell this thing. And in fact, the year before the book comes out, he's tested all these principles. And in 1907, he's handpicked 22 boys that he thinks represent the future of the empire. And again, if you're a 50-year-old man, you really shouldn't be handpicking 22-year-old boys. And we see this come up in scouting time and again.
Right. And presumably it's an incredibly diverse group of boys from all around the empire.
No, he wouldn't even get a kid from Yorkshire because,
his hair was too dark.
They'll steal. Yeah. He takes them all to an island. Again, if you're a middle-aged man handpicking 22 boys, do not take them to an island. Mm-hmm. But he takes them to Brownsea Island off of Dorset, where he used to vacation as a kid. And he spends a couple weeks teaching them the six following things: camping, observation, woodcraft, chivalry, life-saving, and patriotism.
Only two
of
those.
My dream Jeopardy board.
Only 2 of those are skills.
You don't want to teach someone chivalry?
I mean, I guess it's not a skill, it's a code. Or
they seem like the rooms at Dwight Schrute's bed and breakfast.
Yeah.
What do you think observation is?
Well, I mean, observation seems like a skill. I try to...
Is he teaching them how to do magic eye?
Well, no, I think if you say, okay, I want you to go look over this vista and then come back and tell me 5 things that you noticed.
Yeah.
And it turns out, there was a lighthouse and nobody mentioned it. And it's like, how to pick up on what you're seeing, how to see.
Right. You watch the video with the pretty girl in the red dress and you miss the guy in the gorilla suit or something.
Yeah, right.
They do this in The Matrix. This is what Neo gets taught by Lawrence Fishburne.
And also like
camping, observation.
Tracking probably is part of that.
Right. Looking for signs of animals. I think you're right. Scouting today but Scouting today really still kind of has this old-timey veneer of chivalry and patriotism mixed in with the practical skills. And the camp goes very well. And that, the Mafeking Cadet Corps is often thought of as kind of the honorary beginning of the world scouting movement. But these kids on Brownsea Island in 1907, they're really the ones that are living by his manual and saying the scout promise. And therefore, they're officially Scouts. This becomes the beginning of a movement. And Baden-Powell...
Is this a publicity stunt, or how is he profiting
That's
from
the funny
this?
thing. It starts out as a publicity stunt for his publisher. This is going to sell so many books. And I think his military career has run into trouble at this point. He's no longer the hero of Mafeking, which, was kind of a lucky stroke. His wilderness reconnaissance duties don't make him a real good fit for the chain of command now that he's a general. And he's unwelcome in the military pretty quickly, or he's shuffled off to less influential posts. And he decides he's going to retire and donate the rest of his life to this new boys movement, which is going better than his military career is. In 1910, his sister Agnes says, well, why not the girls of Britain? And she starts the Girl Guides. So now between the two of them, they've got movements going for all young British people to learn, how to tie knots and love of the Queen. Or in the case of the Girl Guides, I don't know how domestic the Girl Guides are back then, but I would assume it's not the same skill set. By the time he retires, there are 1 million scouts worldwide because the British Empire, still being the British Empire, it quickly spreads to Canada and New Zealand and Australia, and then it gets a foothold on every continent, and then scouting is suddenly a world. It's the last time a British thing could do that.
At the height
except for Spice Girls.
At the height of the empire, there was a quarter of the world's population under British dominion.
And think about what kind of a market that is.
Yeah.
If you're trying to sell something to kids. And to Baden, and it's really a personality cult at this point. Like we don't have, even in scouting, there will still be respectful stuff in your manual about Lord Baden-Powell, because, he eventually is, I think, knighted for not for his military service as much as for his service to the youth of the empire.
Well, for his mustache more than anything. and his mustache. And his campaign hat. He's got that Rough Riders campaign hat that became synonymous
and he
with
made
scouting.
kids wear it.
Yes.
So even after he retires from the military, he gets to keep wearing that without feeling like it's stolen valor, because he's forced it on 1 million young kids from Canada to New Zealand.
He looks a lot in his older years like my great uncle Al Rochester.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
But he's a massive celebrity among the scouts. Like it's hard to overstate at this time how much it is a personality cult, almost like a fandom, like an Elon Musk fandom, or even a religious movement, because there's a lot of, well, that's not what Lord Baden-Powell would want. What did he do at Mafeking, Timmy? Well, you do that.
And was he ever unmasked as some kind of bad guy, or did he keep his reputation intact until death?
His reputation was largely intact because 1 million boys loved him. Maybe Mr. Rogers is a good analog, even though he does not have possibly the purity of spirit or the psychological insight.
Right.
But he's still the one kind of molding a generation of kids by saying, these are the principles that today's children need. The scouts loved him. When he married, in his old age, in his 50s, he met and married him.
That's not his old age.
It was back then.
Oh, yeah.
He's like 55 and he meets and marries some 20-year-old woman named, I don't know, Olive or equivalent, on a boat. And they are quickly married. And
is on a boat an important part of the story?
I think so. That's how people would meet women back then.
Oh, they met on a boat.
Sorry, they didn't get married on a boat.
Okay.
It was on a sailing to wherever. He spent much of his later life in Kenya. He kind of retired to Kenya. So I think on one of his world travels,
Kenya,
he meets a much younger British woman and makes a beeline for her.
Squad goals.
And when they are married in 1912, every scout worldwide donates a penny to buy them a wedding gift. That's the degree to which it's a personality cult. 100,000 pence pour in and buy him a motor car for his wedding trip. And in fact, he and his, I'm saying her name is Olive, and I don't want to erase his wife from it's Olive with an A. So it kind of looks like Olaf.
Olive?
No, the A instead of the I.
Oh, I see.
Olave?
Olive.
Like the snowman in Frozen? Olave. Maybe it's just Olive, and she and her parents were lousy spellers. Anyway, she becomes Lady Baden-Powell, and they live happily together in Kenya. He retires when he's in Kenya. He kind of retires from scouting, which has now become a massive. In the 20th century, there were There were probably
Scouts thick on the ground.
100 million scouts. And he's buried today in Kenya. It's a national monument now. His grave has one of the wilderness symbols that he loved to teach, kind of the hobo code that he loved to teach his scouts in his manual. It's a circle with a dot in the middle, which means going home, which is, appropriate for a tombstone.
Oh, I thought it meant cat's butthole. And that concludes the Mafeking Cadet Corps. Entry 746.IS2903. Certificate number 31247 in the omnibus. Futurelings, in the unlikely event that social media still exists in your era, in the what's our over and under? What's our over under on scouting? Is it going to exist for futurelings in their era?
I assume scouting will be. I mean, one of the reasons why scouting has suffered in our time is because they've had to pivot to merit badges like
computer programming,
video games.
Yeah,
because the skills once propagated by Lord Baden-Powell seem a little fusty in today's world.
But
they'll become increasingly urgent once civilization collapses.
That's right. I went to the Filson store the other day with a friend who had purchased a bag several years ago, and it had
Seattle Leather Goods Store.
That's right. It had worn out, and they have a lifetime guarantee on their products, and so we were going to the store so he could get his bag repaired. And walking in there, the brand, which used to be actually an outdoor clothing brand, people that are outdoors, these old people who are riding bicycles around the Northwest, they aren't wearing wool and leather anymore. They're wearing all these micro fabrics.
Yeah.
And so all the people in the store, they were all young people with giant beards, and they were, LARPing a kind of outdoorsmanship as a fashion statement. And I'm not completely absolved of this myself. But I wonder if scouting isn't going to be a LARP of this sort of mustache wax culture. If all these guys are going to have kids one day, and they're going to say, "You know what you need? A $700 hatchet."
Are they going to have kids one day? I mean, it all hinges on that.
Yeah, I guess.
If Gen Z is bummed enough that they never have kids.
Yeah, that's what happened to Gen X. Super bummed. No kids.
We were bummed and had a few kids.
Yeah, handful of kids.
The baby boomers were bummed and had 4 kids. We were bummed and had 2 kids. But if that continues, it's either gets sliced in half or reduced by 2 each time. So
0 kids. Gen Z, 0 kids.
0 kids.
0 kids, double income. Well, if you want to find out what Ken and I are doing, you can find Ken on Twitter at Ken Jennings. You can find me on Patreon at patreon.com/John Roderick. You can email us at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. You can support this program at patreon.com/omnibusproject. Your generous donation goes toward keeping the lights on here in the bunker and keeping it from being clammy and getting moisture into all my amplifiers.
Really? We're using the money to buy dehumidifiers? That's what we're doing with the proceeds?
I mean, it's not...
Most of it.
It's not all we're doing, but the dehumidification of this space is part of how we survive.
Instead of motivating people to donate based on the dampness of your basement, let's also mention that there are some pretty cool perks.
There are perks, but I would like to suggest that if you and I were down here and it was as humid as it could be, we would be covered with moss.
And the show would not be as good.
I mean, you might be pretty clever looking covered with moss. I already look like I'm covered with moss.
You're a wise old man of the woods.
I don't need any help.
The perks for supporting the Patreon include a bonus omnibus entry every month, an addenda to the other shows. And at the higher levels, they include such benefits as being able to suggest a topic for the show, which was the case with today's show. Stephanie, a former Girl Guide herself. I'm going to assume Stephanie is from
one of the
Britain or elsewhere in the Commonwealth.
Right.
Not one of the benighted ones, one of the good ones.
Yeah, sure.
A Girl Guide herself, and wanted us to talk about the origins of scouting. So thank you for your support, Stephanie. This one's for you.
Stephanie and all the Girl Guides listening are probably members of the Omnibus Futurelings community, which now spans the internet. So just go in and type in Futurelings to the search bar of whichever program you like the best, and it will direct you to one of the social media sites where Futurelings congregate and thrive. And you can mail us actual things. You can mail us some record of your siege that you survived. Preserved donkey meat. Please don't send that.
Please send preserved donkey meat.
But send us mail at P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington, 98155. Ken, have you got any mail over there?
Yeah, no donkey jerky today, but I do have a distinctive postcard that's come all the way from the southern hemisphere. Leanne and Mari, this is from Mari. She and her sister Leanne are...
in Kenya.
They're Filipina, and they want to stick up for banana ketchup, but even though they're originally from Manila, they now live in Wellington and Melbourne, respectively. This is a chance for us to say Melbourne right, because we got people that were annoyed at some way. One of us said Melbourne in the past. Mari's visiting Perth and sent us a very distinctively shaped postcard of...
Oh, look at that.
This must be the landmark of the Perth skyline, the Bell Tower, home of the Swan Bells. If you've ever wondered where the Swan Bells of Perth are located, this postcard would answer that question. In this oddly shaped tower.
That oddly shaped tower is extremely modernist, making it feel like the Swan Bells are either ancient bells that are held captive in this this bullet-shaped building.
Scandinavian-looking building.
Or they are just some bells that somebody made to go in this weird building. The Swan Bells.
All that Mari tells us is that the locals call this the giant syringe for obvious reasons. And it's a lovely shape for a building, but a terrible shape for a postcard.
It's weird, but it survived with its tiny little point.
The tip, as you'll see, has been a little bit battered by the international mails, but it survived. And Mari cleverly even used the tip to write on. She included that in her writing space. Thank you so much for sending this. Thanks to all our Antipodian listeners. Really, really the better hemisphere, even though we were a little bit anti-Afrikaans.
The Swan Bells are a set of 18 bells hanging in a specially built 82-meter high copper and glass campanile.
Oh, yeah. Well, 18 bells means you can play the Perth school fight song, whatever that is.
We are the Thunderbirds.
University of Washington now has a campanile, but it never used to. I think it was recently donated.
Where is it?
It's just off Red Square, just like, what is that, just north of Kane, I think?
Oh, the bell tower. You know what that also is? It's those are chimneys.
Yes.
It's
not that.
Parking garage.
I don't think they put it there, did they?
Oh.
It's on the other side of Kane, like towards the library.
Oh.
BYU had a campanile or carillon or whatever you call it. And
I refuse to call it either thing.
And my dad has some story when he was at law school there of him and a friend finding it unlocked and going up there and playing Light My Fire on the belts, which is if you're thinking of a funny keyboard part to play on a campanile, that's a pretty good choice.
That's pretty good.
I have no idea if that story's true, but it would probably get you kicked out of BYU even today. Listeners, from our vantage point here in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We have no idea how long scouting survived, but I predict a comeback once the waters rise. Now, we hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come, as good news though it may be for the Weebelows. But if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may be our final word. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.